Hey, I'm Dina Deason, and I'm honored to sit down with Amy Myers today to talk about art. Amy, grew up in Texas.
Yes.
Are you a Southerner? Are you a New Yorker?
Okay, it's a good question. I have to add in there, I was born in Texas, but moved to Los Angeles. So I'm
Okay.
actually three parts. One of the things I love about Texas is that it can really be bigger than life and kind of ferocious in its like independence and autonomy.
Yeah.
And being a female artist in the art world, like I've had to bring that ferociousness and that like don't mess with me energy quite a bit in business.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm very proud to have that as a part of like my makeup.
Right. And so now I want to go into your father.
Mhm.
Particle physicist, isn't that right?
Mhm.
So I had to look up what that was. Tell me more about that and how that's influenced your art.
Okay, so it's interesting, like theoretical physics it's very abstract. It's probably one of the most abstract forms of thinking you can do because you don't base your assumptions on observation. You have to kind of extrapolate through different inquiries, right? So it's not an observable type of science. And so it's a very delicate, very complicated way of thinking. It's really about extrapolating from the unknown, making the invisible somehow conceptually visible at least.
That's so interesting because obviously you grew up in a very intelligent household surrounded by scientists, and I'd read you would, sit there at a dinner table and listen to your dad's friends, and they're talking about these ideas. And I'm picturing in my head somebody that's 9 or 10,
Younger, 4 or 5.
sitting there trying to wrap their brain around at that age. Well, I can't see or touch what they're talking about. How is that real? How you kind of took that and turned it into this incredible art.
As a child, I think that because I had the child mind, like as a child, being like 4 years old and hearing the discussions, it was very easy for me to kind of imagine and kind of jump in because it was a framework that I could play with. Right. And there is an aspect of unknowability to it. I could see some things as a child, like, oh, like if this atom bumped into this kind of interaction would happen and this would disappear into a different dimension and then pop back in. Like I could just kind of see that in a way.
So when you're starting a piece, you don't really kind of envision what it just kind of ends up.
It is like dreaming. I don't ever know what I'm going to dream tonight, but I'm going to dream. So how I started this was that I would take a concept and I would study, I would read. My dad would take me to, physics conferences. And then I would start to pull apart like the essences, the characteristics, the rules around an electron. And I would make these little diagrams. And then I would move on to a different concept. And so at the end of like 5 years, I actually had like a lexicon of symbols. So I started to put these symbols together and these symbols grew and they would create new symbols. So every kind of shape has a correlating meaning to it. Like in this drawing right here, see that little pinpoint, that little red dot at the very end of that drawing right there?
Yes.
That is the Big Bang. See, so everything means something to me. It signifies something.
Okay.
In my mind. You don't have to understand all that because what's left at the end is a feeling.
Right. When you're talking about, to you, this piece has a meaning and this represents this to you, but to me, when I look at it, maybe I look at it and say, well, maybe this is this to me.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. I think what it is that because the work is so complex and it's so multidimensional and it takes, 6 months to 9 months to make each piece, I need to have a scaffolding or a structure to kind of hold the ideas and the complexity together.
Right.
So therefore I have this language that I've developed. My ideas of how the universe works. So it's a very kind of intimate, personal exploration into what is this, okay?
So now we're going into your college days.
I remember like I graduated in 1999, Y2K.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it because it was before cell phones. There was something about artists like getting together. It's really vital. Like even if you're not on the same page and you actually make very opposite types of work, it's so vital for artists to be together and to share and to dialogue and to argue. And so we did a lot of that. It wasn't texting, it wasn't on the phone. It was very dynamic and we were able to really express ourselves without saying something and then getting posted and never coming down. There's a freedom there.
Right. So Chicago, home of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, right.
And I've been on that tour. I love the whole city of Chicago.
Yeah.
and his influence there,
Mm-hmm.
and you being from there,
Yep.
and then now your art is in the Guggenheim in New York,
Correct.
and he was the architect.
Correct.
I feel like that's some kind of connection, like the universe coming together, like a full circle thing. You know?
Well, I'll add to that. When
Okay.
I was in my first year in Chicago, I lived in Hyde Park. I lived in a Frank Lloyd Wright carriage house. I had to say that I found it to be very conducive to kind of creative thought. I felt like there's a lot of value, in kind of a reflective, contemplative, way of life within one of his properties.
Do you feel like there was some kind of influence between, you living in the carriage house or surrounded by Frank Lloyd Wright, how he put structure and nature together, and you put science and art
Which is
together.
nature. To me, I see science as complete nature. Yeah. But yeah, nature and art together. Possibly.
Maybe.
I'll never forget living there.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, when we have experiences, we integrate a piece of that and we
Right.
take that with us.
Right. And I do see some pieces that you've done in pen and ink.
I've worked exclusively on works on paper for like 20 years. And so there's a material limitation that happens with the works on paper.
Right.
Because I layer my gouache, but at a certain point I can't.
Right.
Kind of breaks down. And also as a drawer, I was jealous of painters because a painter can actually harness light on the surface of a work differently than a drawing. Because my drawings are very matte, and so they absorb light. Paintings can reflect light.
Right.
So I went ahead and just started to train myself how to in the oil. And it's now this real kind of vehicle for light. I'm able to layer more complexity. Color is like activated in a different way. I started digging into Goethe, like reading a lot about Goethe's theory of colors and how Goethe takes Newton a step further and brings in whites and blacks as color, and also talks about color itself just being a gradation between dark and light. And so that really opened up my way of thinking about color as well. So I feel like new technology, hence painting, bringing new kind of intellectual curiosities, which is Goethe. So now when I work back on paper, I'm bringing all this with me. So anything in art is always an expansion.
So what do you like better?
Art, really, to me, like on a physical level, it exists on the surface of whatever it is I'm working on, because all of the information is either coming through the tip of a brush or the tip of a pencil. It just kind of depends on the intellectual kind of premises of the body of work that I'm working on. That is what kind of guides the surface that I'm working on. So it's just more about what is more appropriate for the inquiry at the moment.
Another question I wanted to ask you too is about your studio. Found out about the Elizabeth Arts Foundation, where your studio is.
Well, I actually left the Elizabeth Foundation.
You did?
I got a different studio. It was an awarded studio in the East Village, PS 122. But I will talk about the Elizabeth Foundation is a program for artists. You have to go through an application process, and then when you are admitted, you become a member. Then you get a studio. Then you work, and they have open studios like once or twice a year. And so then they invite the community to come in
And tell me about where you are now.
PS 122 it was the old Keith Haring building, and so the studios are like massive and beautiful, and you have like a view of the Freedom Tower, and they're just private studios.
Just like a private business, and you just go and rent a studio.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it was great sitting here talking to you today.
You as well.
Again, I want to say thank you to my listeners, and if you've made it this far, you can find me at dinadeason.com. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yay.
Yay.
All right.